Well, I enjoyed it enormously. I don't know how the audience felt, but I enjoyed it enormously.
You might remember Lee Radziwill as the stylish sister of Jackie Kennedy, or perhaps you've seen her in the glamorous circles of high society. But behind the fame, there was so much more complicated love, a stunning English estate, and a legacy that still raises questions today. What happened to her iconic home, her family, and the wealth she left behind? Stay with us to know more about her story. We bet you won't want to miss this. Lee Radziwill's 18th century English estate. Lee Radziwill's 18th century English estate, Turvill Grange, holds an air of mystery and a legacy of both glamour and solitude. The Grand Manor, nestled in the rolling hills of Buckinghamshire, is a place that has witnessed the very best and worst of history, bearing the weight of its storied past. Now, it stands poised for a new chapter, up for sale for the first time in nearly 50 years, with an asking price of $24.4 million. The question is, what happens when a place that once embodied the dreams and struggles of its owner is left to fade into time? The story of Turvill Grange begins in the 1960s, a time when Lee Radziwill was at a crossroads in her life. The younger sister of Jacqueline Kennedy, Lee had long been seen through the lens of her famous family. Her marriages had ended in heartbreak, and the constant scrutiny of the media made it nearly impossible to escape. She yearned for a place of peace and privacy, a sanctuary far removed from the chaos of New York, away from the glare of the paparazzi, and from the weight of her own celebrity. In her search for a retreat, Lee found what she had been seeking in the English countryside. The estate, located in the serene Buckinghamshire County, was everything Lee had dreamed of. With its grand 18th century manor house and sprawling gardens, Turvill Grange was the kind of place that invited reflection. But it wasn't just the beauty of the house that drew Lee in. It was the land. Spanning a massive 49.39 acres, it offered complete privacy and a chance for solitude, a rarity for someone who had lived much of her life in the public eye. By the time Lee finally secured Turvill Grange, it had already become a coveted piece of land. The estate was no stranger to fame, having once been owned by Henry Ford II and having played host to many notable names over the years, including Princess Margaret and actor Sean Connery. But for Lee, this estate wasn't just a celebrity hotspot, it was her home. Just like her estate, Lee's journey to stardom wasn't a smooth one. It was a path shaped by personal tragedies, public scrutiny, and a deep desire to prove herself. Her childhood, though filled with the comforts of wealth and privilege, was marked by instability. Her parents' tumultuous marriage ended when Lee was just a child, leaving her and her sister to deal with the complexities of a broken home. The loss of their father, who died when Lee was just a teenager, further deepened the emotional rift in the family. Through all of this, Lee watched as Jackie seemed to glide effortlessly into the spotlight while she struggled to define her own role in the world. As Lee entered adulthood, she set her sights on the world of high society, a world that was both glamorous and competitive. She was smart, attractive, and undeniably charming, but it wasn't enough to escape the shadow of her sister. Despite her best efforts, Lee couldn't break free from being Jackie Kennedy's sister. She tried her hand at acting, but her career never truly took off. She was often cast in minor roles, and the media didn't help her cause, frequently focusing more on her family connections than her own talents. Despite the difficulties she faced, Lee eventually found herself among the elite of high society. She mingled with royalty, Hollywood stars, and fashion icons, gaining the kind of access and connections that many would envy. But even as she moved among the rich and powerful, she always felt something was missing, a sense of belonging, of true happiness. It was a feeling that would eventually lead her to make one of the most important decisions of her life, buying Turvill Grange. As Lee settled into her new home, Turvill Grange quickly became a symbol of the quiet elegance that defined her. She spent countless hours tending to the property, making it her own. The manor house, which had been built in the classic Queen Anne style, was beautifully designed, with its tall windows letting in natural light and its wide rooms filled with antiques and artwork. The garden, which had once been meticulously curated, was another of Lee's labors of love, providing a place for her to retreat when the pressures of life became too overwhelming. The years passed, and after Lee's ownership ended in 1974, Turvill Grange changed hands several times. Each new owner struggled to maintain the property, facing the daunting task of keeping up with its sprawling size and the wear and tear of time. What had once been a stunning retreat, with its manicured lawns and elegantly decorated rooms, slowly began to deteriorate. The grand house, though still impressive, began to show signs of aging. The roof leaked in places, the paint on the walls peeled, and the garden, once full of life, became overgrown. For decades, Turvill Grange remained abandoned. Its rooms, once filled with music and laughter, now sat empty. The furniture, though still beautiful, collected dust, and the windows, once gleaming with light, began to fade into darkness. The grand estate, once a symbol of Lee Radziwill's success and elegance, became a forgotten relic of a bygone era. The land itself, though still magnificent, lost some of its luster as the years took their toll. Yet despite its neglect, Turvill Grange retained a sense of magic. There was still something captivating about the property, the way the sunlight filtered through the trees, the vastness of the land, the quietude of the surrounding hills. For those who knew its history, the house held a special kind of allure, one that made them wonder about the days when Lee Radziwill called it home. Though Turvill Grange offered beauty, prestige, and escape, Lee never truly found peace within its walls. Her complicated relationships cast shadows even the grandest estate couldn't chase away.
Going backstage was always wonderful as they were tuning up and exercising and screaming.
Complicated love life of Lee Radziwill. When people think of Lee Radziwill, they often see the elegant younger sister of Jacqueline Kennedy. She was always beautifully dressed, always seen with famous friends, and always in the spotlight, yet often just outside of it, like a quiet reflection of her more famous sibling. But behind the glamour and the designer gowns was a woman with a heart full of longing. Lee wasn't just chasing love, she was chasing meaning. Her first real step into love's complicated maze began in 1953 when she married Michael Canfield. He was a publishing executive, adopted into wealth and society. On the outside, he seemed like a perfect match for someone like Lee. He was charming, smart, and fit well into the high society world she belonged to. But something was missing. The passion, the emotional connection, Lee couldn't feel it last. By 1958, the marriage ended in divorce. It was her first lesson in how love could look beautiful but feel empty. Then came Prince Stanisław Albrecht Radziwill. He was a real Polish prince, and when Lee married him in 1959, she became a princess. For a while, it felt like a fairy tale. They had 2 children, Anthony and Christina, and they moved through the world like royalty. But behind the photos and titles, there were cracks. Stanisław was much older than Lee, and their personalities often clashed. She was modern, expressive, and craving purpose. He was traditional, reserved, and sometimes distant. Slowly, the fairy tale faded. By 1974, the marriage ended. Lee was no longer a princess, at least not on paper. But perhaps the most tangled part of her love story came with Aristotle Onassis. The powerful Greek shipping tycoon met Lee during her second marriage, and the two became close, very close. Some say she fell deeply for him. He was rich, bold, and could give her the kind of attention she never got while living in Jackie's shadow. For a moment, Lee thought he might be the one, but fate had a cruel twist in store. Onassis didn't marry Lee. He married Jackie. That betrayal cut deeper than any divorce. Lee had not only lost a man she cared about, but also saw her sister step into the role she had hoped to claim. It shook their relationship. They eventually reconciled, but something in Lee dimmed after that. Still, she kept searching. In the 1970s, she found a spark with Peter Beard, a wild and adventurous photographer known for his work in Africa. He was the opposite of her world, raw, untamed, emotionally free. For a time, Lee was drawn to that energy. It was a break from the stiff, controlled love she'd known. But Beard was unpredictable, and their romance didn't last. She also shared time with British comedian Peter Cook around the same period, another attempt to find a connection outside the traditional mold of her past relationships. But again, nothing stuck. In 1988, Lee tried love one more time, this time with Herbert Ross, a successful Hollywood director and choreographer. By then, she had lived a full life. She wasn't the wide-eyed girl chasing fairy tales anymore. She was wiser and maybe more realistic. Their marriage was calm and less public, but even that didn't last. They divorced in 2001, and Ross passed away later that same year. All these relationships, some long, some fleeting, had one thing in common. Lee kept trying. She kept hoping to find someone who saw her, not just as Jackie's sister or a glamorous socialite or a title, but as a woman with dreams, flaws, and a heart that wanted to be loved. Even in her final years, after her name stopped making headlines, Lee's past loves still lingered in the background like faded photographs. Her relationships never quite fit the neat boxes the world wanted to place her in. Some were filled with passion but no stability. Others had comfort but no soul. And some were just heartbreaks dressed in diamonds. Her love life wasn't perfect, but it was real. Lee Radziwill may not have found the kind of lasting storybook love we read about, but in a world where she was often known for who she was related to, her pursuit of connection on her own terms was perhaps her greatest act of rebellion. She wanted to be seen, to be chosen, not because of her last name, but because of who she was inside. Even if she didn't find that one great love, she never gave up looking. In a way, that kind of hope is its own kind of victory. Though her love life was filled with twists and heartbreak, one role gave Lee a deeper sense of purpose. That was motherhood. Motherhood in the spotlight. When Lee became a mother, her life changed in a way that no headline could capture. Her son, Anthony, and her daughter Tina became her grounding force. In a world that constantly watched her every move, they gave her something real to hold on to, something untouched by fame. She didn't parent with strict rules or high expectations. She parented with intuition, warmth, and a strong desire to give her children a sense of peace, even when the world around them was chaotic. She once admitted in an interview, "I didn't want them to be swept up in all of it. I wanted them to be normal, if that makes sense." And in many ways, she tried to create that feeling of normalcy. There were family dinners, shared quiet moments, and long conversations away from the buzz of society life. But motherhood wasn't always smooth. Like any mother, Lee faced her share of worry, especially as her children grew older and carved their own paths. Anthony had a strong will, a thoughtful heart, and a love for storytelling. Lee supported his choices without pushing him in any direction. She respected his independence. Their relationship was marked by open conversations and mutual admiration. She wasn't just proud of what he did professionally. She was proud of who he was as a person. Their connection deepened even further when Anthony faced a serious illness. During his cancer treatment, Lee was a quiet constant. She didn't make grand gestures or public statements. She simply showed up over and over again. One close friend once shared, Lee never left his side. She didn't want attention for it. She just loved him. That's it. Losing Anthony was something Lee rarely spoke about. When she did, it was in short, reflective comments. But those around her could feel the loss had changed something in her. She became softer, more introspective. Her grief was deep, but it didn't make her bitter. Instead, it made her even more grateful for the memories she had with him. Every small moment, every shared laugh, every late-night phone call. Her relationship with her daughter Tina was quieter, but no less meaningful. Tina was more private by nature, and Lee respected that. They bonded over books, art, and design. Their conversations weren't loud or dramatic. They were thoughtful, often stretching into hours of reflection and observation. One family friend recalled how Lee used to say, "Tina doesn't need me to tell her what to do. She just needs me to listen." And that's what she did. She listened. She supported. She gave Tina room to be herself without judgment. Over the years, Lee grew more appreciative of the simple things. Watching her children grow, celebrating their small wins, being present for their lows, that's what mattered most. Her love wasn't loud. It was consistent. In one of her final interviews, when asked what she was proudest of, she didn't mention her famous connections or glamorous life. She said, "I think I've been a good mother. I hope I have." That's all that really stays with you in the end. That one sentence seemed to hold the weight of everything she had lived through. Not the fame, not the travel, not even the heartbreaks. Just the hope that she had loved her children well and that they had felt it. Motherhood, for Lee, was never about control or creating a perfect family image. It was about being there, really being there in the moments that mattered. It was about holding her son's hand during the hardest days, about listening to her daughter's thoughts on life, about showing love without without needing to be seen doing it. She may have moved through grand estates, attended elite events, and known kings and presidents. But at home, in the quiet corners of her life, she was simply Mom. And that version of Lee Radziwill, the version that laughed with her children, cried with them, stayed close even when things were hard, is perhaps the most powerful one of all. Every beginning carries the weight of an ending, and for Lee, her final chapter unfolded not with noise, but in a quiet, graceful fade, just like the woman she always was.
The younger sister of former First Lady Jackie Kennedy Onassis has died.
Tragic death of Lee Radziwill. Lee Radziwill's passing on February 15, 2019, marked the end of a captivating and complex life that had unfolded in the public eye. Known for her elegant demeanor and effortless chic, Lee's death quietly closed the door on an era, one that had been lived in the spotlight and yet, in many ways, surrounded by mystery and complexity. Lee had lived a life that few could truly understand, a life that seemed as glamorous as it was tragic. As the years passed, she carved out her own path, though often in the shadow of her famous sister, Jackie. Lee's story was filled with triumphs and sorrows, love affairs and marriages, fame and its discontents. Yet, it wasn't just her role as a sister to a first lady or as an icon of style that captivated the world. Lee Radziwill was more than just the glamorous figure people saw at parties. She was a woman who had learned to navigate the intricate webs of wealth, fame, and personal pain, often alone. Her death came after a period of gradual fading from the public eye as she had retreated from the spotlight in her later years. Lee's quiet withdrawal contrasted with the lively, youthful figure she once was, an actor, writer, interior designer, and a woman who stood by the side of history-making figures. But despite her elegant allure, Lee was never fully comfortable with the role that others had assigned to her. She wasn't simply a glamorous, silent fixture in the background. She was a woman with depth, intellect, and undeniable strength. Lee's passing sent ripples through the world of fashion, art, and high society. In a tribute shared by Carol Radziwill, her daughter-in-law, she acknowledged that the world had lost someone who had been loved deeply. It was a poignant moment for a family that had seen its fair share of public tragedies and hardships. In the days following Lee's death, the tributes poured in from people who had known her in different capacities, whether as a friend, family member, or colleague. Tory Burch, the well-known designer, expressed her grief over social media, sharing, "We are heartbroken, and I will miss our dear friend. Rest in peace, Lee Radziwill." Her words echoed what so many others felt. Lee's influence reached beyond the world of high society and into the worlds of fashion and culture, where her style, sophistication, and presence were unparalleled. Lee's personal and professional relationships spoke volumes about her character. She was not someone who craved attention. Rather, she commanded respect and admiration. What made Lee Radziwill so unforgettable wasn't just the men she dated or the circles she moved in. It was the way she carried herself, with a grace that seemed so effortless, yet was, in truth, the result of years of personal struggle and sacrifice. She had seen so much, lived so much, and experienced more than many could ever imagine. Yet, for all the elegance and fame she exuded, she was a woman who spent much of her life searching for peace, for happiness in a world that demanded more of her than she was willing to give. Her death left behind more than just a collection of designer gowns and a legacy in high society. It left behind a treasure trove of memories, moments, and relationships that defined her existence. For many, her death marked the end of an era, a time when American high society was defined not only by wealth, but by people like Lee, who moved through it with such charm and poise. It also meant the end of the life she had fought so hard to make her own. In a fitting tribute, Christie's auction house held an auction of Lee's personal collection in October 2019, revealing glimpses of her life through carefully curated pieces. The auction, which included a photo album documenting John F. Kennedy's 1963 visit to Berlin and a childhood Bible, showcased the significance of Lee's place in history. As the gavel came down on the sale of these items, it felt like another chapter of her life was being sealed away, leaving behind only memories and objects that once belonged to a woman who had lived much of her life in the public eye. Items from her personal collection, including photographs and artifacts, revealed the intimate side of Lee's existence, far from the perfect, pristine figure she was often portrayed to be. Yet, there was no denying that Lee Radziwill had lived a life that many only dream of. Her relationships, Marriages and adventures were constantly under the microscope. But despite the glittering world she inhabited, she had always sought something deeper, a connection to herself, a sense of meaning that was often elusive. After her passing, many questioned what it truly meant to be a part of such an elite world. Was it worth the cost of personal happiness and fulfillment? In the weeks and months following her death, tributes continued to pour in, reminding the world of Lee's lasting impact. From old friends to the new generation of celebrities, people spoke of the memories they had shared with Lee, the moments that would never fade. But Lee had left us with more than just memory. She left behind a legacy that continues to inspire those who admire her elegance, her poise, and her quiet strength. Lee Radziwill was more than just a socialite. She was a woman who lived with grace in a world that often demanded much more than it could give. And in her passing, she left behind a world that will never quite be the same without her. After her death, curiosity sparked about her net worth and who would inherit her vast estate, leaving many to wonder just how much her legacy was truly worth. Net worth of Lee Radziwill. With a net worth estimated between $20 million to $50 million at the time of her passing, her wealth came from multiple sources. A woman of taste, style, and sharp business acumen, Lee's financial legacy wasn't only built from the high-profile social circles she moved in, but also from her real estate ventures, investments, and family trust funds. But after her death, the question remained, who would inherit her wealth, and where did it all come from? Born into a life of privilege as the sister of Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis, Lee Radziwill was no stranger to wealth. However, unlike her sister, Lee carved out her own niche in the world of fashion, business, and entertainment. She was known not only for her connection to the Kennedy family, but also for her successful career as a socialite, ventures into real estate, and her refined taste in art and fashion. Lee Radziwill had an eye for luxury, and this extended into her real estate investments. She owned several high-end properties throughout her life, including a luxurious penthouse in Manhattan and a ranch in California. These properties, often rented out or sold at a profit, generated a steady stream of income for Lee. The Manhattan apartment, in particular, is one of the crown jewels of her real estate portfolio. The California ranch, on the other hand, represented a more personal retreat, offering her a quiet escape from the hustle and bustle of her high-profile social life. In an era when real estate prices were steadily climbing, these investments in property were wise, ensuring her financial security. A passionate collector of 19th century French art and antiques, Lee Radziwill's wealth wasn't just confined to properties and investments in financial institutions. Her deep appreciation for culture and the arts saw her amass a valuable collection of paintings, sculptures, and furniture. These pieces, acquired over many years, added to her net worth, were often sold to the highest bidder when she needed additional income or wanted to downsize. Some of these rare art pieces also found their way into her luxurious homes, making her spaces not only investments, but reflections of her sophisticated taste. Lee Radziwill was involved in several business ventures, which helped boost her wealth. She had a stake in the private equity firm, the Carlyle Group, which made investments in a wide range of industries, from finance to healthcare. This was an astute financial move that allowed her to benefit from the growth of the global economy. Her interest in the fashion industry also played a crucial role in building her fortune. Lee was a shareholder in Oscar de la Renta, one of the most iconic luxury fashion brands in the world. Her association with such a prestigious brand was not only a reflection of her personal style, but also a shrewd financial move. As the fashion industry continued to grow in value, so too did Lee's investment. After Lee Radziwill's death in February 2019, many were left wondering who would inherit her wealth. With no immediate heirs who were publicly involved in her business dealings, the question was raised, what would happen to her estate? Lee's children, Anthony Radziwill and his sister, were the primary beneficiaries of her wealth. However, Anthony tragically passed away in 1999 from cancer, leaving his widow, Carol Radziwill, who later became famous on the reality show The Real Housewives of New York. Carol, as Anthony's widow, was often considered one of the main figures to inherit Lee's wealth. It was widely believed that Carol would be the primary heir to Lee's estate, particularly since Anthony's death left her as the surviving member of the immediate family. It was also reported that Carol and Lee maintained a close relationship, with Carol often being described as a source of comfort to Lee in her later years. Apart from Carol, Lee's other family members and friends, who were often seen as a part of her inner circle, may have also inherited inherited a portion of her estate. Lee's sister, Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis, was said to have left behind her own legacy of wealth, and it's possible that some of that fortune was passed down to Lee as well. The complex web of family and trust funds, along with various legal considerations, made the exact division of Lee's estate somewhat murky. Still, her wealth was undoubtedly passed down to those closest to her. Despite the question of who inherited her wealth, Lee Radzivill's legacy extends far beyond money. She was a prominent figure in the world of socialites and an iconic personality in her own right. Her personal wealth reflected her taste for the finer things in life and her ability to make astute investments in real estate and business ventures. Her legacy is also tied to her role as a style icon, fixture in the fashion world, and her connection to some of the most important social and political figures of her time. Even after her passing, her influence continues to be felt, as people continue to look up to her for inspiration in matters of business, style, and grace. What are your thoughts on Lee Radzivill's incredible life and legacy? Drop them in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more insightful stories.